Okay, thanks.
Good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. We will call today's Board of Commissioners meeting to order. For the public, there is a copy of the Open Meetings Act located on the north wall of the legislative chambers. There's an automatic defibrillator in the back of the chambers. With that, I'd like everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, let me start by putting everybody on notice that at 10 o'clock, we do have Dr. Liu coming in through the Zoom for the presentation on the Board of Commissioners agenda for the psychiatric emergency services. So I'll give warning, but at that point, we will kind of pause whatever we're at and then go to the that presentation at 10. So I wanted to make everybody aware of that. With that, we will go into the Board of Equalization meeting and roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson.
Present virtually.
Commissioner Marine Boyle. Commissioner Mike Boyle.
Here.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Here.
Commissioner Friend.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
Mr. Chair.
Here. Item A is the roll call of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Item B is call for a meeting and set Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021 as the date on hearing on certified assessments and corrections. What's the will of the board? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, Mike Boyle, seconded by Commissioner P.J. Morgan. Seeing no questions, please vote inside. Mr. Clerk, please call the Zoom roll call.
Sure. Commissioner Borgeson.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Under resolutions, we have two items.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioners Borgeson and Kavanaugh voting virtually, all other commissioners voting in person.
Okay, under resolutions, we have two items, D and E. Is there a motion to approve D and E and adjourn? Motion by Commissioner Mike Boyle, seconded by Commissioner P.J. Morgan. Hearing and seeing no questions, Mr. Clerk, please roll call Zoom and vote in the chambers.
Mr. Chair, were you going to do citizen comments?
I forgot, sorry. Citizens' comments. Are there any citizens' comments on the Board of Equalization for anything on the Board of Equalization agenda that's not listed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Please vote.
Yep.
And roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Chris.
Me? Got it.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioners Borgeson and Kavanaugh voting virtually, all other commissioners voting in person.
We'll now open up begin the Board of Corrections meeting. Roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson.
Present.
Commissioner Marine Boyle. Commissioner Mike Boyle. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Here.
Commissioner Friend.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan. Here. Mr. Chair.
Here. Item 2 is citizens' comments. Are there any citizens' comments on Board of Corrections specific items that are not listed on the agenda? Board of Corrections specific items not listed on the agenda. Are there any citizens' comments? Seeing none, we will move on to item 3 in the report of the director.
Mr. Chair, item A, or item 1, excuse me.
We didn't, okay, sorry, I'm off today.
You're good.
Is there a motion and a second to approve item 1? Sorry. Motion by Commissioner Mike Boyle. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Friend. Vote in chambers, roll call Zoom, please.
Commissioner Borgeson.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioners Borgeson and Kavanaugh voting virtually, all other commissioners in person.
Okay. Now, item 3, Director Myers.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Mike Myers, Director of Corrections for Douglas County. You have before you, at least those of you who are present in person, my monthly report. Enclosure number 1, our administrative services. Following the 8th month of our fiscal year, our budget projection is that we will finish $1,254,547 under budget. While this is encouraging, we do have some additional expenses beyond what we originally budgeted related to staffing for virtual court and changes to our new security system that have been recently finalized. We do, however, intend to finish this fiscal year under budget. $357,000 was spent on overtime during February. This is a decrease of about $32,000 from the previous month and about $72,000 from December. As we have achieved near 100% staffing and plan to maintain that level, we hope to realize further savings as our newest officers complete field training in early March. Enclosure number 2, community corrections. Due to the drastic impact on the COVID-19 pandemic on community corrections activities, our data is significantly different than the norm. Work release, the Reentry Assistant Program, or RAP, therapeutic communities, GED in its normal form, I do have something to report on that later, and the law library were all suspended for the duration of the month. We are still addressing individual requests from the law library. Our reentry services staff have transitioned out of conducting virtual court hearings as three people were hired for the newly created position of virtual court facilitator. We are currently hiring reentry specialists that we did not fill as vacancies occurred during the pandemic. There were 516 court hearings that were facilitated virtually and 45 hours of discovery. Our 24/7 program operations have changed dramatically to minimize face-to-face interactions during the pandemic. We have seen an increase in drug test violations with the changes to that program due to the immediacy of testing and the consequences for drug use. However, now that all of our staff have been vaccinated, we are beginning to make plans to safely transition that program back to normal operations. I should clarify, not all of our staff have been vaccinated, but all of our staff who work in that program have been vaccinated. We do not yet have a timetable for that change, and we will work with the health department on changing protocols. During February, there were 64 individuals placed on the program. 2,533 breath tests were completed using remote breath technology. 13 were positive for alcohol use. There were 9 no-shows, and the overall compliance rate for breath testing was 99.2%. 54 individuals were monitored for 1,330 days of scram monitoring. There were 3 no-shows, 0 tampering violations, and 8 alcohol violations. The overall scram compliance was also 99.2%. There were 136 saliva drug tests administered with 14 violations. And there were 168 drug testing patches submitted for evaluation with 43 violations. As I mentioned, work release was closed for the month. House arrest admitted 24 individuals. The reentry assistance program was closed. Limited programming by reentry services staff has resumed in our therapeutic communities. Pretrial Services continues to provide daily information to the courts regarding candidates for bond reduction and early pleas in response to the pandemic. 23 individuals were referred for priority prosecution, saving 517 bed days. 223 individuals were placed on pretrial release in February, and overall 1,553 individuals were managed on pretrial release with an 85% compliance rate. The law library was closed throughout the month, but individual requests continue to be addressed. We continue to participate in a year-long pilot project to implement the public safety assessment as a strategy to enhance our pretrial release supervision and supportive services. And we also are implementing a new pretrial release case management software system. It is currently being implemented, and it will play a key role in the pretrial release enhancements planned throughout the remainder of 2021. Enclosure number 3, compliance. We will participate in a virtual American Correctional Association accreditation hearing as the formal follow-up to our, now it's not so recently completed audit. The virtual hearing has been rescheduled to April 20th. Preparations for our NCCHC, which is the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare audit, are underway. The audit of our medical services will be completed later in 2021. Enclosure number 4, personnel. 1 sergeant and 2 officers below the rank of sergeant left employment in February. A class of 17 officers graduated from the training academy on February 19th and will actually now have completed field training on March 5th. Congratulations to Josh Bullock and Christopher Godwin on their promotions to sergeant. And congratulations to Sergeant Lavelle Whitner on his well-deserved retirement from DCDC. His leadership and advocacy set a great example, and he will be missed. Enclosure number 5, population. During February, we had 1,039 admissions. That is a decrease, a fairly significant decrease over our monthly average. I have some beliefs that the 30 below zero temperatures suppressed activities of all sorts during the month and led to the decrease in admissions. We did release 1,130 individuals in February. Our high count was 1,272. Our low count was 1,156. Our average daily population decreased to 1,200 per day. That's a decrease of 68 per day, which is very welcome considering the restrictions we have on housing due to our COVID protocols and the shortage of maximum security beds we have as the courts are just now getting started again, and some of those cases have been sitting for quite some time. Our custodial sanction bed days were 73. That is also a decrease. I've done this before, but I think it's well deserved to do it again. I do want to give kudos to probation for being creative during the pandemic, finding alternatives to incarceration to monitor and sanction their population. Those custodial bed sanction days, for a frame of reference, used to number in the hundreds, several hundred per month pre-pandemic, and you can see they've gone down dramatically. The U.S. Marshal population decreased. The ICE population decreased. The felony pretrial population decreased. The misdemeanor pretrial population increased. Probation violations decreased. The female population decreased, and we were able to consolidate to 3 female housing units. We haven't been able to do that for a few years, so that also is a big benefit because it gives us more flexibility on housing individuals without having that 4th female housing unit open. Enclosure number 6, medical. There were 1,057 intake screenings. There were 275 health and physical assessments. Inmates were sent out 16 times in February for emergent medical care. 9 of those were by 911. There were 7 hospital admissions, which resulted in a combined 19 days of hospitalization. Enclosure number 7, mental health. There were 173 initial psychiatric assessments. There were 112 initial mental health assessments. There were 69 mental health infirmary placements. That's down a little bit, but still a very high number. We had 1 referral to the Board of Mental Health and 3 individuals that were sent to long-term psychiatric facilities. And other items of note, we continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are fortunate to report that the number of positive COVID-19 cases among our staff and incarceration remained low in February. We have been fortunate to have approximately 230, or roughly half of our staff, receive the COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Ann O'Keefe of the Douglas County Health Department will be conducting a virtual town hall for our staff on March 12th, this Friday, to educate and answer questions some of our staff have on whether being vaccinated is the right choice for them. We hope to continue to increase the percentage of our staff who are fully vaccinated as soon as possible. We continue to follow CDC and Douglas County Health Department guidance and advice during the pandemic regarding the use of quarantine, testing, PPE, and sanitation. Effective March 1st, we were able to reduce staffing costs by utilizing a thermal camera purchased through the CARES Act that enables us to eliminate the need to have a staff person present at our COVID checkpoint 24/7. We are working carefully with the courts and the sheriff's office to implement safe and practical protocols as the courts are reopening for trials in March. DCDC has a vested interest in the courts successfully operating as we continue to have a short supply of maximum security beds. We continue to move forward with several major projects, not COVID related, including the implementation of body-worn cameras for all of our officers, development of implementation of an inmate tablet system, which will have far-reaching impacts, and a very significant project in implementing our new security system. During the past year, many of our typical pressing issues have been overshadowed by the impacts of the pandemic and civil unrest. Those issues remain, however, and our staff continue to address tremendously difficult situations on a daily basis in caring for a population with a tremendous amount of risk and need. I'll conclude my report by telling you a story about an individual who we recently had in our custody. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, our medical staff informed me that we had an individual who was severely mentally ill, one of many in custody. This individual's story caught my attention and set it apart from the typical, in that I was told that he'd been standing for over a week without sleeping, without sitting down, and that he was now starting to do damage to his lower legs due to the swelling that was occurring from the blood basically accumulating in his lower extremities. I asked to consult with our medical director, Dr. Montague, and said, what's the best course of action? I've never heard of anybody being able to do this. I would barely have the energy to stand for 7 hours, let alone 7 days. So we determined that we would go hands-on or use force to attempt to put the person in a restraint chair so we could put compression socks on him. And we did that for a few days. However, the behavior, that became dangerous in and of itself, as he was very combative. We were putting him at risk. We were putting our staff at risk. So we reconvened as a team to talk about this, and the doctor concluded that this was no longer worth. The risk of doing this was outweighing the benefit. The difficult situation with this is that he was sort of in a no man's land. He wasn't in imminent enough risk for us to take emergency measures and have him committed. But we certainly didn't want to wait for him to do damage to himself and be able to, to create injuries that then would require an emergency response. So there are a lot of other details with this that demonstrate what our staff go through every day that are less pleasant to talk about, and so I won't in a public setting. But fortunately, we were able to work with the public defender's office and the prosecutor's office, and we were able to get this individual, his charges, even though they were not insignificant, were dismissed, and he was sent into the mental health system where he belongs. And we were able to get him out of our custody and into an appropriate level of care. And I wanted to share that with the commissioners and with the public just as one example of many situations where we don't have a lot of good choices to choose from when we're addressing a situation. And we do our best to choose the choice that we think will cause the least amount of harm and give us the greatest amount of benefit in return. So it's a tremendous challenge that our staff face every day, and I wanted to make that sort of a scenario public because it is what happens on a regular basis, that our staff are forced to address situations where there's not a clear-cut choice of the right thing to do. We put our heads together, we do our best, we consult the people who are experts, and most of the time we do end up with a positive outcome. But that was just a very interesting week and a half for us as we had that individual in that situation. With that, I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions in the chamber? Commissioner Maureen Boyle.
First, I want to say, especially to that story, as a physician, I appreciate that because a lot of my staff and I have actually been assaulted by patients as well. So we understand the challenge it takes to show restraint when you're in the presence of someone with a mental illness. I like the course this is taking. I think that stressing that type of mentality among employees is key. Think of this person as, yes, dangerous, but actually when you take it, understanding they're suffering from a medical condition, I think it really changes the perspective. Then the other question, I just had a couple questions just in some of the information you were giving us. You mentioned that some of the inmates, there are 911 calls and they end up hospitalized. Just for my information, can you just give an idea of what types of reasons that's happening?
I'll be honest, I don't have I don't have the information on all of that, but I can tell you in general.
Sure.
It could be anybody experiencing chest pains where we need to get them out right away. It could be that they've had an injury that occurs during after hours when we don't have a provider there who, if there's a laceration, you won't have anybody qualified to administer stitches. High blood pressure issues frequently. I'll include a few examples in future reports
Sure.
to give you that, but it's basically any sort of a need that outweighs our ability to handle it with our medical services on site.
And then the other question too is, is there COVID in and among the inmates at this point? It sounds like staff is doing well.
We have a couple of staff who are out right now, and I don't have the exact number off the top of my head for inmates, but there are, I know just have one positive test yesterday. But that number is in the single digits right now.
Very good, thank you.
Commissioner Mike Boyle.
Thank you. Mike, another excellent report. You're doing a terrific job over there, and I want to take a moment to thank your staff. I know what kind of work they're going through and what kind of challenges they face. I wanted to ask, I had received a call from the union at the Omaha Police Department, and I met with them about a problem with searching women when they come in, women who are arrested. And I'd just like to ask you, I didn't find out what the total final thing was. The problem that the Omaha police had was that if there was not a woman, female, who was an arresting officer, there was no member of the OPD who was female. So they would call the nearest woman to come in and do the searching, and sometimes they're way out 210th and Dodge. And I was wondering how that was resolved, if you could just tell us all
Sure.
briefly.
So the background on this is after, in last fall, when a gun made it into the facility,
Right.
We made some significant immediate changes on our expectations for law enforcement. We made a decision right then and there that we couldn't, we regularly find contraband of various sorts for people that law enforcement has missed. But when a gun came in, we decided,
Yeah.
that was a game changer. We made the decision that we weren't going to assume that a proper search had been conducted that we didn't witness ourselves. So we painted a red box on the floor in our pre-book area, and developed with OPD and Douglas County Sheriff's Office and others protocols that we were going to insist upon. And that included conducting a search that we witnessed that would be on camera. So we had, I think everybody had kind of fallen into a comfort zone, law enforcement and us, we facilitated
Sure.
it as much as anything, was if they didn't have a female officer nearby, corrections will just do it. So we, I didn't think that was fair to our female staff to put them at risk compared to our male staff. But I also understand the fact that OPD has a mission to accomplish to keep our community safe, and keeping them needlessly detained from doing that is not wise either. So we developed some workarounds, but we do, for instance, if they know that there's not a female available and there's not going to be one available, we can hear from a sergeant from OPD, can call our watch commander and say, there's not a female available, can you guys assist? And we will do that. We also know that cross-gender pat searches are not going to be as thorough. Mm-hmm. And we've said that from the beginning, and we understand that. But we do want to at least see that they've done a cursory check of the individual, male or female, so any obvious contraband, something as big as a gun, is going to be located prior to us assuming custody of the individual. And what we've also told them is that if they do that search, even if it's cross-gender and it's not as thorough as it would be with the same gendered search, and then we put the individual through our body scanner, if we find something that is present on the body scan that wasn't seen or wasn't felt in the pat search, we will go ahead and assist at that point as well. So I do want to walk the line between having law enforcement's responsibilities be law enforcement's responsibilities, but also acknowledge there are times where we can step in and assist, just as a matter of practicality and efficiency. So that really, is our position, is we still want law enforcement to handle their responsibilities, but we are willing to have protocols in place when there absolutely needs to be some support from us to help them get that done.
So Omaha Police and Sheriff's Office happy with this arrangement?
I believe so. We met with Chief Schmaderer and Deputy Chief Gray a couple of weeks ago and talked through a few issues.
Okay.
And made sure they understood the workarounds in this plan, and we seem to be on the same page.
Did you meet with any union representatives, Jim McGuire or any of the others?
I did not. I did not
Okay.
hear from Mr.
All right.
McGuire.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
I have 17 other questions, but I'm out of time.
You get a second shot if you want. Commissioner Friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, yeah, great, good information in the report. Appreciate it. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it a little bit, Mike, or at least my question would be oversimplifying a really complex question or an issue. From a medical, when the medical issues occur, and some of this we can take offline, I'll get a chance to talk to you on various occasions, I'm sure, going forward, obviously. When a medical issue occurs, when an emergency situation presents itself, depending on the time of the evening, the time of the day, or whatever, can you generally talk about mitigation procedures that occur for corrections officers? So in other words, for example, are there currently in place in an emergency situation? What do the rounds look like for a corrections officer between, midnight and 4 in the morning? I mean,
Sure.
So if there's something that actually happens, somebody's not pushing a button. I mean, the guard's got to find it.
Correct.
Right? So can for my edification, or at least my education, and maybe the education of the public, can you tell us kind of at a high level how that works?
Absolutely. I'm not going to get into the specifics on the actual frequency in a public forum because that's
Okay.
kind of more of our security-related operations. However, what I can tell you is there is, in general population, there is a minimum number of rounds that need to be done on a shift and actually per hour. We don't want them done with predictability. We want them done with some degree of randomness, but we do have multiple rounds per hour that our staff do where they look in every cell and observe the individual and check all the areas of their housing unit. We also have we have some housing, and we have several different levels of housing units and precautions that we take that escalate from there. We have some higher risk housing units where we use 2 officers instead of 1 to increase just double the set of eyes that's on everything. And then we have our individuals who are on a behavior watch, which is more frequent still in terms of the number of rounds and the frequency that eyes are laid on the individual. And we have suicide watch, which further increases the frequency. And then our highest level, which we have been doing more often than not, and sometimes with multiple people at a time, and it represents sort of a hidden staffing cost, is we do a constant watch, where we have individuals who come to jail who are determined to harm themselves. We will actually have an officer posted right outside of their door 24 hours a day, and their only job is to observe that person and be ready to call for assistance to intervene if anything begins to happen. So, without, like I said, I don't want to get into I can talk to you privately about those protocols, but we do escalate all the way up to watching somebody 24 hours a day.
And it's safe to say, thanks, Mike, and it's safe to say then, based on that the process is fairly unpredictable to detainees.
Correct.
I mean, it's made in that fashion, and there's a process that forces that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's intended to be less predictable.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mike.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thanks for this report. Regarding the population demographics, I don't have the physical report in front of me, but could you outline those for us? I'm sure they're contained in here someplace.
They are. And I see now that at least the copy I have, the graphs didn't print out properly, but my apologies. We are currently probably close to a 60% minority population in the jail. Well, it's in a tab number 5, and it's back. I see we're also missing page numbers. My apologies. Yeah. So I'm not sure what happened to these graphs, commissioners. So I apologize for that. So it doesn't have complete data, but it's about the 5th page back on enclosure number 5. I apologize for not reading all of that through ahead of time.
No, we understand. And maybe you could submit that to us later. But it does or does not have a breakdown regarding race and gender.
It's not complete, so I would rather send it to you electronically accurately than publicly state something that might be incorrect.
I appreciate that. Thank you. You indicated that the average daily population is right at 1,200. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And year over year, we're just coming up on the first annual mark off of the impact of COVID. So year over year, do you have an idea of where we were 12 months ago in terms of average daily population?
We were higher as of right now. We actually had our first criminal justice system meeting on COVID. I remember this very well. It was on, probably should have been indicative, it was on Friday the 13th of March last year. And the criminal justice system did a very good job of responding quickly. Everything from standing up virtual court in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks from when it was first discussed as an idea until it was actually implemented. Our cooperation with prosecutors and the courts and the public defender's office on accelerating court cases to get people out of jail in a timely manner. And we went from early March till the end of April, we dropped precipitously in our population. The issue since then is those more serious cases that can't be handled in virtual court have just continued to kind of stack up. But we were up over 1,300 at this point a year ago. We got down to, I believe, as low as 1,060 individuals in late April or early May last year. And then kind of just have gradually crept back up ever since.
Right. You mentioned that half of the staff has been vaccinated and you're working on the rest, and that's good. Relative to the 1,200 individuals in your care, the census population incarcerated, what's the status of that population, those people, regarding vaccinations?
You got 1 minute, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
We continue to work with Audie Poor, Dr. Poor and her staff. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is probably the best option for the jail because we do have with a good number of our individuals, there's a rapid turnover. So a single shot course is probably the best. We are probably a couple of months away at least from being able to do that. We are currently in the process, our medical department is, of becoming a vaccine administrator themselves. So that when the vaccine are available to us, we can do that. We obviously will prioritize our vulnerable individuals. We do have an 82-year-old in custody right now, so we want to get somebody like that vaccinated as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Commissioner Kavanaugh. That's your time. Commissioner Morgan.
Mike, I just want to say to you that, and I think I speak for the board members, you don't have to ever apologize. I heard you 3 times. We greatly appreciate what you and your team do, totally. And we thank you so much, because I know you go there at 2 in the morning or whatever time that phone rings, and I can't thank you enough. So I just want you to know, I appreciate you saying you apologize, but you don't ever have to apologize to this board. We just need to continue to be supportive of you and do all we can to make sure your team knows that this board stands behind you and the challenges you face almost every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Boyle, you wanted to go again?
Yeah. Mike, there's so many questions that I have, and I've been going through this, and one of the things I want to ask you about, and I just want to kind of reel off a list of concerns that I have, because I have a lot, but one of them on page 36 of 37, there's a graph that really indicates a high degree of mental health diagnostic figures, and they're really incredible because we had, in January, you had a total of 971 people who were diagnosed with some kind of mental illness, from depression all the way up to schizophrenia. And it's an ongoing problem that you're dealing with, and all of us I know are very concerned about it. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, which is not on the same subject, is bail. We need to, I don't know where we are on that. I've kind of lost track of it. I know there's some opposition from some of the judges about bail because it does cut into their discretion, but I don't want to be, none of us want to be keeping people in jail on minor offenses and that keep them away from their jobs and their families, because that can really be destructive. So I mentioned that. I'm also concerned about, for men and women, if they are being taken away from jobs or arrested for something, what's their housing situation? And I know you get into all this sort of thing. And I'm asking these questions in a hurry because I know that we have times now that we can't really talk forever like I used to. But anyway, those are some of the questions that I have, and I'll send you some emails on them. And maybe one of these times we should really focus in on the illness that you have and what you treat over there, because it's really amazing. And I think the taxpayers are paying something like $6 million a year for that health care for people who are incarcerated. And the other thing that's really an insult is that if a veteran comes in and is arrested, it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, but if a veteran comes in and is arrested, that his health care is stripped from him or her. It's taken away. And it's an extra penalty. And then when they leave, we have to work with them to try to get them to reapply for benefits that they've earned. I mean, what an insult that is. And it's just another slug that comes out of the dark and hits them right in the face. And just another insult that makes it more difficult for life. It just makes things rougher. So one of these days we'll discuss more about bail, what ought to be done, how do we get people out of jail, how do we protect their jobs, how do we protect their families, and what can we do to, it's probably a virtually all-day discussion. But you are doing a terrific job, and Commissioner Morgan's correct. You owe no apologies to us for anything. I mean, I complain about numbers on pages, but that's insignificant. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. And regarding a couple of things that you said, our treatment of individuals who are severely mentally ill is one of our biggest focuses. And just because the pandemic has forced us not to talk about that as much doesn't mean that it's not there. And in some ways, I actually think it's made it worse. And regarding bail, my hope is our pretrial release reforms that we're working through right now with the judges. We have a working group that consists of county court, district court, the city prosecutor, county attorney's office, the public defender. I have several staff involved. I probably have left some. I actually have representatives from the police department and the sheriff's department in it as well. We're hoping that that collective effort will result in some tangible, substantial change over the course of this year.
Okay, good deal. Well, keep it up. You're doing great, and we'll get together. And Commissioner Maureen Boyle has offered to buy lunch, so we'll do that. Oh.
Sounds great.
Okay. Any other questions out there? Seeing none. Seeing none from the commissioners. Mike, you good?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn the Board of Corrections meeting? Motion by Commissioner Boyle. Second. Motion by Commissioner Mike Boyle. Second by Commissioner Friend. Roll call Zoom. Please vote.
Commissioner Borgeson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Okay. Motion passes 7-0. Commissioners Borgeson and Kavanaugh voting virtually, all our commissioners voting in person.
We will now call to order the Board of Commissioners meeting. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Borgeson?
Present.
Commissioner Maureen Boyle? Commissioner Mike Boyle? Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Here.
Commissioner Friend? Here. Commissioner Morgan? Here. Mr. Chair.
Here. Item one.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, can I interrupt for 1 second? And may I ask the board and all on Zoom and all watching, if we could please take a moment of silence. We all know that Dr. Joe Stothert has passed away this a few days ago, and I would like to take a moment of silence to for his family, Mayor Stothert, her son and daughter, and grandchildren, that they all, including Dr. Joe, find peace in healing, and that we have them in our thoughts and prayers. So if we could all just take a moment of silence right now.
Yes, thank you. Just know for the record, Commissioner Morgan asked me the same thing, so you all on the same wavelength. If we can now have a moment of silence for Mayor Stothert and her family. Thank you all, and we wish God's continued grace on them as they handle this tough time. With that, we go to item 1, minutes and claims. Letter A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting held Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. Letter B is the approval of claims submitted for payment and processed through Tuesday, March 16th, 2021. What's the will of the board? There's a motion by Commissioner P.J. Morgan. There's a second by Commissioner Mike Boyle. Seeing no questions, roll call Zoom, and please vote in the chambers.
Commissioner Borgeson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioners Borgeson and Kavanaugh voting virtually, other commissioners in person.
Note on the consent agenda, there were 16 original items. 2 items are asked to be removed. Letter A is on there removed, but also item H1 is going to be removed. With that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Commissioner Mike Boyle, seconded by Commissioner P.J. Morgan. Please vote in the chambers. Roll call Zoom.
Commissioner Borgeson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioners Borgeson and Kavanaugh voting virtually, all their commissioners in person.
Item 3 is recognition and proclamations. Letter A is a resolution honoring Meals on Wheels and recognizing its annual March for Meals celebration. Commissioner Maureen Boyle.
Thank you. This was presented by sorry, I got my 2 jobs confused, by Commissioner Borgeson. Whereas the annual March for Meals celebration commemorates the historic day on March 22nd, 1972, when President Richard Nixon signed into law a measure that amended the Older Americans Act of 1965 to include a national nutrition program for seniors 60 years and older, and whereas for nearly 50 years, these critical programs, commonly referred to as Meals on Wheels, have delivered more than just nutritious meals to homebound seniors in virtually every community across the country. And whereas the dedicated staff and volunteers who deliver these meals each week provide a vital lifeline and connection to the community, which are sometimes all it takes to keep our senior neighbors at home where they want to be. And whereas since 2002, community-based Meals on Wheels programs from across the country have joined forces for the annual awareness campaign to celebrate the successful public-private partnership and garner the support needed to fill the gap between the seniors served and those still in need. And whereas in Douglas County, the Eastern Nebraska Office on Aging's Meals on Wheels program has filled the nutritional needs of the homebound for 45 years, providing hot meals personally delivered by a team of volunteers and paid drivers. And whereas Eastern Nebraska Office on Aging's Meals on Wheels program currently has 8 staff members, 26 paid drivers, and approximately 200 volunteers. And whereas in 2020, Eastern Nebraska Office on Aging's Meals on Wheels program served 1,086 Douglas County residents by providing 140,752 meals, a total cost of $974,653. And whereas food is one of the most basic human needs, yet it is something many of us take for granted. Some people are homebound, have no family members nearby, and have few options for getting groceries into their homes. Others may be physically or mentally unable to prepare meals. And whereas as our nation's senior population continues to growing exponentially, Meals on Wheels remain a critical program effectively addressing the challenges of aging by promoting health and improving quality of life for at-risk seniors. Now therefore be it resolved by this Board of County Commissioners, Douglas County, Nebraska, that this board hereby honors the Eastern Nebraska Office on Aging's Meals on Wheels program and recognizes the annual March for Meals celebration dated today, the 9th day of March, 2021. I present the motion for this resolution.
I take that as a motion to approve by Commissioner Maureen Boyle. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Friend. Do you want to say anything, Commissioner Borgeson?
Yes, I do. Online, we have with us Arla Schmidt from the Office on Aging, who runs the Meals on Wheels program and has for, over 40 years, I think. She is extraordinary, not only just an extraordinary lady that we celebrate during Women's History Month in what she does, but her running of the program is amazing. I have watched the operation over the years, and how she coordinates and how she gets everything out on time is, again, extraordinary. Besides the nutritional fact of the Meals on Wheels, having folks delivering those meals, also there's a social aspect of it for those that are homebound and frail. Sometimes that's the only human reaction or interaction that they have with someone. And so it's a very important program. And again, I give Arliss and her staff kudos, and our volunteers for all they do, and celebrate her staff, and this month as Meals on Wheels. So thank you very much. And thank you, Commissioner Maureen Boyle, for reading the resolution for me. And Arliss, if you wanted to say anything, you're more than welcome to. See, she's just a woman of few words, but of great service to our counties. So thank you, Arliss.
Yes, thank you. Seeing nothing further, there's a motion, a second. Please vote and in the chamber and roll call on Zoom.
Commissioner Borgeson,
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh,
Yes.
all right, motion passes 7-0. Commissioners Borgeson and Kavanaugh voting virtually, all other commissioners in person.
Okay, thank you. With that, we got about 7 minutes to Dr. Poor. Well, no, let me go. We'll go to citizens' comments. Item 4. Are there any citizens in the chamber that want to comment on Board of Commissioners related items not listed on the agenda?
Good morning, Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I'd like to speak quickly about the structure of our laws from the nation on down, which does apply to Douglas County. Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Nebraska. We're all subject to both of those. I have a fresh copy of the most recently printed copy of the Nebraska Constitution. It's quite clear in there that the right of the citizens to petition their government shall not be infringed. Doesn't say a whole lot more than that. It doesn't go into explaining what the words mean. So we citizens have to rely on bodies like yourselves to interpret those. I guess we don't have to rely on it, because we do have the right to petition to suggest that maybe you need to rephrase some of your interpretations of those things. Excuse me. One of those interpretations might be the Open Meetings Act. And I emailed some of you, most of you, overnight to be included in my comments today. I recently had an opportunity in a public forum to ask the Nebraska Attorney General a question, or maybe a two-part question, that had to do with who does the Open Meetings Act, who is it for? Is it for me, the citizens, or is it for the elected bodies and appointed officials? The simple answer was it's intended basically for the citizen. So bodies like yourselves that interpret it certain ways to make what are supposed to be reasonable rules that sometimes aren't, that's your prerogative, but we do have the right to petition about it. Often that citizen doesn't get more than 3 minutes, if he gets that much. Sometimes, if they're slightly off to the left or slightly off to the right of the sentence structure on that resolution or whatever, they're called out of order. If they speak a little bit too long, they're called out of order, and possibly somebody up there decides to point the finger to a deputy, which signals to that deputy who my taxpayer dollars paid for, that that citizen needs to be removed. Now, I suggest that perhaps the deputies be allowed to make their own decisions as to what citizen, under what circumstances, should be removed. That's what they're paid to do. The King of England used to point his finger. The colonists revolted about that, didn't they? We had a revolution. Well, our founding fathers, in Article 5 of the Constitution, intend for us to throw off that type of government, which we did. But they didn't mean street revolution for throwing off this kind of government. What they meant was we have the right to petition. If we need to alter the federal government, we can do so with a constitutional amendment. The plain reading of it is that's only a right for the federal government and the state legislatures. They both have their own ways to do that. But if you read the Founding Fathers, their implication, not expressed, but implication is the citizens who that government is for also have the right to petition for an Article 5 Convention of States, by which we can alter that government, to throw off that government. Not a street revolution, not a French Revolution. And so I asked the citizens to think about this, particularly with city elections coming up. You can do a revolution. You can vote everybody out that's an incumbent. That's one way to alter. When they don't want to listen, you come down to petition at the microphone. When they don't really want to listen or back and forth with you about it, then you still have the right to vote them completely out of office. But I can't vote him out. I can't vote him in. So think about it before the election is for the city, because to a certain extent the city resides within the county. So the county can be a lead in altering some of those possibly unreasonable rules in light of it shall not be infringed.
Thank you, Larry. Anyone else in the chamber?
Luis Jimenez, 3306 Birch Street. I'd like to submit some citizens' comments since it only happens on Tuesdays. Mr. Chair, regarding the American Rescue Act, it has been passed, and I've been, aside from what's going on, I've been looking at that money. And so it's been passed. There was some major negotiations that impact the residents in county, the citizens, not just with the money that the local governments are going to get, but with their ongoing assistance, which builds their capital stack. And so that has been a big problem during this pandemic, that people are losing money all sorts of ways, like nearly a depression. I mean, some of us don't feel it, others do. And I think that's what an ongoing debate is, how the money is impacting the response to COVID. Having said that, I do want to relate to you guys about another health matter that has been recently identified by the health department, which is racism in Douglas County. The health department mentions that that is a health issue, and Commissioner Rogers, I think you voted for it recently, that to think about it as much or behave or act that racism is impacting the health of residents and citizens of Douglas County. I've started a media channel. It's called Codex Omaha, and it talks about demystifying society and the civic process in Omaha for action to dismantle the systems of oppression and racism that bring about inequities. So I'm with these sentiments that we have to change what isn't working, but I don't think we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. More targeted reform. I know there's a comment saying that a surgical approach it's preferred rather than to brute force. I don't think I'm, doing much outside what I can do, but together we can get through this. Recently, so one thing is that $200 million came in from to the state and the county, and the county has allotted and contracted $4.3 million for rent assistance and utility assistance for residents outside of Omaha city limits plus Ralston, and then the city has their own allotment and contract for $22 million, and that totals to $26 million. Lancaster and Lincoln are getting $16 million, and the remainder, I think it's $158 million, is going to the state. The governor is going to lay out the money or distribute the money for assistance. So the way I see it, there's been a major accomplishment recently with Congress passing this assistance in, what was it, December 20th or 22nd? And then now the local governments having a way to distribute or disperse the funds for rental assistance and utility assistance, which is like one of the most basic needs. It goes to shelter. So I wanted to comment that because, we all want to get out of the pits here soon. And I think I trust that we will. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the record, the American Rescue Act has not passed quite yet. It's got 2 more steps. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, we will go now to presentations and go down to item B since it's 10 o'clock. I see Dr. Liu is there. You want to test your mic, Dr. Liu?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Okay, it's on you if you're ready.
Thanks so much, Commissioners, and we welcome this opportunity to share about the progress on the adult psychiatric emergency services. Our psychiatric emergency services manager, Jen Sparak, is going to share her screen, and then we'll kind of chat through things. She's a social worker. I'm the chair of psychiatry at UNMC. I'm a child psychiatrist. And Dr. David Cates is a psychologist. He's our vice chair clinical. And what we're going to do is just chat through just some innovations and the process that we've taken, what we've learned so far in nearly the first 6 months of the psych emergency being open, and just reporting back and welcoming any feedback or insights from this community of leaders as well. So as Jen is getting started, I just want people to know that we've been open since October of 2020, and that was an initial soft opening. So a few things we've learned along the way, but it might be good just to refresh our roots as to, where we were when we started out as well. So yes, Jen, we can now see your screen. And if you want to go to the next slide, David can go ahead and kick us off.
Thanks so much for inviting us to update you. I had presented this briefly before, and I'll just quickly summarize just to give you the context for what it is we're trying to achieve with the psych emergency service. So what we've been seeing here, I don't know, Jen, if you can go to the next slide. What we've been seeing here in Douglas County is part of a larger national trend with regard to psychiatric patients presenting to emergency departments. And since 2006, across the United States, we've seen a 50% increase in visits to emergency departments for psychiatric and substance use concerns. So at this point, about 12% of all ED visits are for a psychiatric emergency, which is a tremendous number of people showing up to emergency departments, which is a setting really not optimized to treat them, both in terms of the skill set of the professionals who are deeply compassionate, but just not deeply trained, and also in terms of the physical environment. So at Nebraska Medical Center, we've been seeing the same thing that we're seeing nationally, steady increases in the number of such patients in our emergency department. So from 2015 to 2019, and I know it's too small to see, that's the third little slide there, but you can see that blue, those blue columns there, but those are the numbers of patients in our emergency department with psychiatric and substance use concerns, and it's steadily increased to over 3,000. The very last bar on the graph was last fiscal year. It's slightly lower, and that was due to the pandemic. We had overall decreases in emergency department volume, particularly in the beginning of the pandemic. But some of that continued throughout.
Hey, Doctor, we can't see the bar here, so they may need to advance the slides. I see it down under, but we're still on the first one.
Yeah, and it's Jen, while you're working on it, it's okay. I mean, the Jen, hopefully we'll get it up, but the trend is the increased numbers, and then along with that, you have to keep in mind that about half of those patients that show up with a psychiatric emergency end up getting transferred to a psychiatric hospital. So the other dynamic is that their length of stay in the emergency department also continues to increase. Oh, that's great. You can go to the next one, Jen. They have the two graphs. So the top graph is what I was talking about in terms of numbers. And then the bottom one there is what I'm just sharing now about length of stay. So those patients end up staying for up to 24 hours on average. So you can see in fiscal year 19, 25 hours was the average length of stay. In fiscal year 2020, it was slightly over 20. And that's the mean. So some of them end up staying several days in the emergency department waiting for transfer to a psych hospital. And so that's the problem we're trying to solve with the PES. And alternative in two ways. One, if they do have to wait, it's a much better environment to be in. It's staffed by people who are trained psychiatrically. And secondly, we hope to send many of them home and not have to be transferred by working with them by starting active treatment in our emergency service. And so with that, I'll if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them. Otherwise, I can turn it over to Jen to update on how it's been going.
Actually, I'll kind of kick in for a couple slides here as well. So this is just a reminder to all of us in thanking the patients of our community and Region 6, which manages behavioral health services in this community, just that it takes time for a great idea to really take root. So this group of community stakeholders came together, commissioned a report back in 2015, which identified this gap in psychiatric emergency services. And it took several tries, let's just say, to get everything together, a couple requests for proposals, and really some background work where many of us have started reaching out to our colleagues around the country that had psych emergencies to see which ones were working the best. And we narrowed it down to a couple of good models. One was at Alameda County in California, where they have this so-called crisis observation model where oftentimes people stay less than 24 hours, they get stabilized, and many don't end up needing inpatient services. So that was one model we adapted. And the other was based on consultation with the other couple of Midwestern institutions, primarily University of Michigan, where They have over a decade of experience with psychiatric emergency. Also, where I trained as a resident as well, so I was personally familiar with it. And they were extraordinarily helpful. So we went to visit these various sites. And then we finally got to the opening phase in October with a lot of support from Region 6. So it went public in January. I think people started to hear about it. So the soft opening was in October. And right now, everyone is coming in through the medical ED because our partners from the inpatient hospitals have asked for pretty rigorous medical screening as we're getting things open. We want to move towards a goal of eventually getting towards walk-in patients, but we are not there quite there yet. We think we're moving towards that towards the fall of this year. But it really has been a long-awaited vision, at least 5 years, but probably far longer in this community. And I just want to recognize that these are the people that are making it happen. Dr. Cates is here today and Jen Sparrow. We also have our medical directors and nursing director and other admin leads, but really it's been a labor of love through some challenging COVID times and other areas. So I'm gonna turn it over to Jen now, just to talk through really that this is a community-wide effort. So Jen, take it away from here.
Great, thanks everybody, and thanks Dr. Liu. So this, I think, is a slide we maybe shared before, but I think relevant to this group because we touch so many pieces of this, whether it's our psych emergency services or inpatient hospitals, the mobile crisis response teams, community-based organizations, our correctional system. They all really play a role when we're talking about meeting some of the needs of our most vulnerable citizens. And while this isn't a circle, we know that oftentimes the way people access points of care is not that way or even this way, but it's kind of a lot of different ways. And so we all need to be kind of working together to make that work happen. And so this has been just really a dream collaboration, I think, for us on the Nebraska medicine side, as we have opened and been able to have really good working relationships with partners. One of the things on the next slide we'll see, and I believe I shared this map before, but we've had to adapt for spacing related to COVID. So if you'll recall, in the center part, bottom center part is our observation area, which really is meant to be kind of a big living room style, open lounge space for people to really decompress when they're in that space of crisis. With recliner chairs, it's not bedrooms, and they have those private interview rooms and where clinicians can see them. So we've had to reduce some of the furniture. So rather than having 12 recliners, we have 8 right now. We've taken out some of the other furniture just to really provide that safe space and distancing for our clients when they're coming to see us. On the upper part of the map is where our secure area is, and there are 6 private rooms there. So those provide a little more ability to keep that distancing as we need to there for our patients. And then in the center of that floor plan is really the workspace. On the left side is the nurses' stations for the 2 areas. And then right in the center is the workroom where our psychiatrists and our clinical team are doing their work and typing up reports, et cetera. So now I really am happy to be able to share some data with you since we've been open. So the next slide will kind of let you know, since October 5th, and this I ran right before we got on here, so we have served 678 folks. Now, some of those are people who have revisited us from time to time, and we absolutely want to be that for folks. If somebody is in a crisis, we want to be that place where people feel like they can come. If they can come and see us for a few hours, and divert a hospital admission or prevent some kind of encounter with law enforcement, we welcome that. We certainly want people to come back to us. Our goal for the psychiatric emergency services is to be less than 24 hours. Right now, we're sitting at that, right at that 20.66 hours. So I think, obviously, we've got things, and you'll see that here a little later, kind of that run the spectrum of it, but we are on average sticking with that metric. The next slide really goes over overall length of stay, and it breaks that down a little bit more. And you'll see the majority of folks are staying with us right in that 12 to 24 hour mark. And then the next one would be 6 to 12 hours. We do have a few outliers you can kind of see on that far right side that are here over 72 hours. I would say those in general tend to be folks who have a more complex picture. So they may have some co-occurring medical issues. They may have co-occurring intellectual disability issues that just make that finding that next good place for that person to go a little more challenging. The next slide talks a little bit about how do people come to us? And I do want to clarify this, as Dr. Liu said, everybody is starting in the emergency department. So this arrival means right now is being captured through how they come through the emergency department. When we start taking direct admissions, this may change some as well, but the majority, almost 2/3 of folks are coming to us from home in one way or another. That could be of their own volition. Somebody from their family is telling them they need to come, et cetera. And then you can kind of see the breakdown of the other ones there as well. Omaha Fire Department would be if somebody's coming in by squad, that type of thing. The next slide talks about hold status, and that really is related to legal status. I think we'll clean this up the next quarter that we run this, because some of these kind of EPC little slices and dices don't completely aren't used, and they don't necessarily make sense for what we're doing. But I think the intent here is to see that 70% of folks that come to the emergency department are voluntary at the time that they arrive, and about 30% are involuntary. And of those involuntary, the vast majority start on an EPC. Now, again, this is the time of admission to the ED. Sometimes that changes where somebody starts out on an EPC, emergency police certificate, and that converts into them becoming voluntary and willing for treatment. Other times it matriculates into a board of mental health. There are some times when somebody comes in initially voluntary, and that does convert over to a board of mental health if they're not willing to seek inpatient treatment and there is some concern for safety for themselves or others.
Jan, can you just remind people the difference between EPC and board of mental health? Sure. What that means?
Sure. So the EPC is that police certificate that starts when somebody comes in contact with law enforcement. If the police are called out to somebody's residence or they see somebody who maybe they're concerned maybe has a mental health condition that needs some treatment and they're not willing to come in voluntarily. And that's good for 36 hours. And during that 36 hours, we're required to do a psychiatric evaluation and then determine if that person does indeed need some higher level of care to address their psychiatric condition, or if they can be released back to the community. If that person requires higher level of care and they're not willing to seek it, then at that point, we would do a board of mental health petition through the Douglas County Attorney's Office. The next slide talks a little bit about our diagnosis grouping, and that's a little bit messy too. I will clean that up, but and this is about half of the total number of diagnoses that we get in, but relevant, and I'll kind of point out some of the colors for you there. That lighter blue, bigger piece, that is the #1 reason people are presenting is for suicidal ideation. The second most common is for somebody with some type of psychotic disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder. And then the third highest would be somebody with a mood disorder, major depression. So when you look at that, almost 50% of the folks are presenting with either a mood disorder and or suicidal ideation. What this does not show is the number of folks who may have a co-occurring substance use disorder. And of course, we know that plays hand in hand with the exacerbation of a lot of these different diagnoses.
I'm just going to add that for the next year, we are hiring a faculty member that will add an additional layer of substance use coverage as well, Dr. Moore. So that piece will be even more strongly covered.
Yeah, the next slide really shows kind of our payer source, and this might be relevant or interesting to this group. So just at 23% of the folks that we're serving right now are uninsured or self-pay. And those really are the folks who we're able to use that wonderful partnership we have with Region 6 to help them get connected to services here and then refer them on to the next level of care. And then kind of cascading down are our Medicaid providers in there as well. It looks like, is that a question with the hand up?
We'll take it at the, we'll take it after you all finish.
All right,
We'll take them on.
super. So about 50% total are either Medicaid or self-pay that are coming into the psych emergency services now. And then the next slide really just kind of shows the breakdown of where folks have gone when they've left the psychiatric emergency service. So of that total number, 179 have gone home. And that is home, but often, well, always, I would say, with some kind of a referral, whether that's to outpatient med management, to some type of day treatment program, to some kind of community resource, community support, really wanting to link people so that they feel like they are supported in their mental health needs out in the community. Douglas County Mental Health Center has been our primary source of inpatient hospitalization. They have been a wonderful partner to take our referrals when someone does require that higher level of care. Methodist and Fremont has also been great, as well as Lasting Hope. You'll see, just for some clarification on other there, and you can kind of see that number has gone down over the months that we've been open. We noticed in our database that we didn't have Fremont as its own entity when we opened, and so we added that later. So you can kind of see those numbers have shifted over the months as we're getting better at knowing where to disposition people with their destination as far as in our medical record. And then really the next things for us are thinking about, where do we go from here? What are our next steps in the PES? How do we constantly keep ourselves staffed well? You know, using you know, our connections with the local schools for folks. We're a teaching site, and that, you know, with having different trainees both from the medical schools, the nursing schools. We have a MSW social work student this semester. We're excited about our peer support specialists that are here and being able to be a site for any of those kind of disciplines. It's a unique way to work in an interdisciplinary way. So we like being that for folks. We're interested now that we're getting more data, and we've been open on, you know, what are our opportunities to really look at quality improvement. How do we look at that 24-hour length of stay and decreasing that, looking at safety issues for folks when they're with us and when they go home? How do we continue to work on diverting people from needing inpatient hospitalization and better collaborating with our community? And to that end, how do we improve our warm handoffs? COVID has been a little bit of a deterrent in that. But I will tell you, the community providers are very eager to be able to come more on site, to be able to meet clients when they get ready to leave. Salvation Army's Emergency Community Support, Lutheran Family Services, Urgent Care, they all have, you know, and see the need for that piece where people are more likely to follow through with care when they know who it is they're going to be seeing when they leave us. So, the last piece with that, of course, is are there opportunities to change the service definitions for psych emergency services? And I think that is it. We can't thank Region 6 enough for being a wonderful partner to us from the very beginning when the Tri-West study was done all the way till now. It's been a great partnership. They have been good advocates for us, but also really helping us leverage the partnerships in the community. And that really is essential to our success and functioning, I think. So with that, I think we are at a space that we could take some questions from folks.
Okay, any questions in the chamber? Commissioner Boyle? Mike Boyle.
Yes, first I want to thank you very much for this, Dr. Liu, and all the folks that are involved in this. This is really a real dream come true. So I do have a question, though, some pretty elementary ones. Where are you located?
So we are in the ground level of Clarkson Hospital. So for folks who would be familiar with where the old emergency department was when Clarkson Hospital was a freestanding hospital, we're using part of that space. Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that, although I'm treated there. I don't understand where that is. If you walk in the main door from the parking lot, where do you go?
If you walk in the main door of Clarkson, there's the gift shop, and right behind the gift shop, there's an elevator bay.
Okay.
And you would take that elevator down one floor, and we're just right there.
Okay, that's great.
It's also, Commissioner, it's also next to the Stores Pavilion. I don't know if you ever had coffee over there, but it's also contiguous to that.
Okay, great. I was just curious. I never really understood where you were. I thought you were on 42nd Street. I was wrong. I want to ask you, sometimes, I haven't recently, but I have received in the past calls from parents who are desperate with young adults who are having serious mental health crises. And do you have an emergency phone, or do they supposed to call 911, or what is the protocol for that?
So, Commissioner President, and that happens here now too. People will call the call center and then we'll get a call down here. Because everybody is being medically screened through the emergency department, we direct people there. And if it's safe for families to bring them in, then, you know, they certainly can do that. If it's something where they want to call law enforcement is very involved with the PEZ. We've got some subcommittees that they're involved with our community advisory board. And we meet once a month with them. So they certainly are equipped to bring people in for that medical screening. And then they would come down to the PEZ. One of the things in our assessment period is really collecting that collateral. So we really want to be able to get that information from the family members too, who often can speak to, you know, what's going on that we maybe don't see in that very, you know, brief window of time that we're interacting with somebody.
So could I just add, Commissioner, you mentioned parents of children. Just to be clear, we are not permitted, the Department of Health and Human Services Nebraska said we absolutely cannot treat anyone under 19. So it's adults only in the PEZ.
Right. These are young adults, you know, who've had 21 and older who have have a mental health problem, not juveniles. But I did want to ask, so what you're saying is that they should go to the UNMC emergency room? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yes,
okay,
that's correct.
Then they get sent on from there. Okay, that's great.
Yes.
Then I want to ask something that Commissioner Borgeson may jump in on, but there is something about a 16-bed requirement or maximum or something that I've never understood coming down from the federal government. And I'm wondering where, you know, you've been able to place these folks. I know Emmanuel and other places in Lasting Hope and our own facility. What can you say about, do you have adequate beds to place these folks who need help?
So I know what you're referencing is the IMD, Institute for Mental Disease designation, that has to do with a lot of residential places are limited by that because it directly impacts the funding that a client will receive for entitlement. So I came from that world and I understand how that can really be difficult then, where you want to be able to serve more people. It doesn't impact us in our environment, but it certainly could as far as referring to community resources. We haven't experienced that yet, but I think the community resources certainly would probably say it makes it difficult for them to be able to plan adequately because they are bound to that bed limitation.
Well, in terms of community beds, Jen, do you want to comment on like the patients who on that graph with the length of stay, those people who are over 72 hours? Because it's not necessarily a lack of beds across the board, but it's not having beds for the most acute and some subpopulations. Jen, I don't know if you want to say more about what.
Sir, could you identify yourself for the record?
Oh, I'm Dr. David Cates. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health at Nebraska Medicine, and I'm the Vice Chair of Clinical Services in the Department of Psychiatry at UNMC.
Thank you.
And do you need me to clarify my role too?
The County Clerk Danesh. No, we got. I believe you announced your name first, so we're good. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, I think what Dr. Cates is saying is right. If it's somebody who needs inpatient care and they're here for that longer stay, it's generally because the hospitals are feeling that person requires that special care, ICU level of care. And those beds oftentimes are not as available as we need. And that can sometimes be sort of that throughput issue of if there's not a right bed in a community setting, then that person stays longer in a hospital, which then makes it difficult for us to transfer. So there is sort of this chain of events that happens with that. And I think in some of the community providers too, that's been difficult. I think COVID has played a little bit of a role in that because there are some quarantine expectations, and sometimes people don't want to do that, or it becomes an issue where they need to have a COVID test before they can go. So we certainly will do that before they're there. We have sent folks to mental health respite at Salvation Army, and that's been a nice transition for folks because in addition to stable housing, they also get case management with that.
You can get another shot, Commissioner Boyle, but you got some other questions.
Thank you.
I don't see any others in chambers. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you for this great report. Could you make sure that we get a copy of that PowerPoint? That'd be Very helpful. Thank you. Following up on what you were just talking about, the availability of long-term beds for people in the community after they leave your facility, there seems to be a shortage of long-term care beds available in the community. Did I understand you correctly on that?
I think for people who need that level of care, I would say a good majority of folks that we work with are living in some type of independent living. So really the goal isn't necessarily that people need that residential level of care, but when they do, sometimes that isn't always available and there are waiting lists. But really I think the bigger place where we have opportunity as a community is with the community-based services. Affordable housing for people is another piece that really plays into that, because as you'll see, when almost a quarter of the folks we work with are uninsured, that also means that they're very limited in being able to afford a safe place to live.
Right.
Commissioner Cowan, if I just can add to that response to help clarify something, because you mentioned long-term placement. So we did a little study a couple of years ago looking at what are the obstacles both for hospitals and emergency departments getting patients into psychiatric hospitals. But as part of that, we also looked at what's making it difficult for psychiatric hospitals to get patients out to free up the bed. And that's where the long-term treatment options become an issue, because often there are, at any given day, multiple beds in our region that are holding patients who really are ready for discharge according to the psych hospital, but there's no place to discharge them, whether they're waiting for the regional center or whether they're waiting for long-term residential care. So I do think it impacts, it's got a cascading effect, even in an acute emergency department, as we hold to get into a bed that's being held up by someone who needs long. So I do think, and actually regional center and residential were two of the largest categories of why beds were being locked up on psych hospitals.
So thank you, doctor. I think, trying to drill down on that, it's a distinct population separate from this, I believe you termed it warm handoff population, where there are services that these people can transition to, whether they're Salvation Army or any other provider. This is people who need a place to stay while they're being treated that we're talking about, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And that's where the shortage lies. And I understand that, there's a backup here as you described it, because there's no place for them to go. One of the discrete populations that I'd be interested in is people presenting with substance abuse problems. Do we have a referral for inpatient substance abuse treatment for these people in our community?
So we certainly have a few different pipelines with that. We've been working with Douglas County Detox, and that's been a nice place to transition somebody once they're medically clear that there's not a concern they may have some kind of a withdrawal crisis. We've been able to transition there, as well as working with our partners like at Centerpoint and places like that have the residential. If it's somebody that has a different place where they can stay, looking at intensive outpatient programs is also an option. But the trick sometimes is that bed is not available when we're looking at a length of stay at less than 24 hours. Sometimes there's an interim placement that's needed while that process is being worked through.
Right. I guess what I'm asking about is the traditional, and usually it runs like a 30-day inpatient substance abuse program. There used to be one over on Cummings Street at the Epley Center. Is there anything like that in our community currently?
So Centerpoint, which used to be Campus for Hope, just behind the Sienna Francis House. And it's actually nice because Douglas County Detox is housed in the same building. They have a short-term residential, and they also have their co-occurring residential for individuals with mental health and co-occurring substance use disorders. Those are two. Some of our shelters have residential programs in them. There's still, Nova is still available also within the community. So there are residential substance use treatment programs.
I'm gonna stop you there, Commissioner Kavanaugh. That's time. We'll come back if you got any more questions. Commissioner Boyle, did you have any more you want to follow up on? Anything else in chambers? None. Back on you, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. So just so that I understand, the 30-day inpatient substance abuse treatment beds in our community, do you have an idea of what capacity we have available now?
That I don't know. I could get it for you though, certainly.
That'd be great. Thank you. The people who come in to the ER, is there another psych ER in the community, or is this it?
Well, so Lasting Hope Recovery Center, which is not an emergency department, so they're not set up to handle patients with comorbid medical complications. It would be, it serves a similar purpose, but that's the distinction. So if there's a, concern about their medical status, their unstable blood pressure, and they're psychotic, that would not be the place to bring them. And that's kind of the niche that we're trying to fill in the community, is people where there's both medical and psychiatric, because we have both here. But Lasting Hope sees a lot of patients, and Emmanuel's emergency department also has a high volume of psychiatric patients, and they can handle people who have medical and psychiatric. And one of the other benefits for them is they have inpatient beds at their disposal, both there at Emmanuel and also through Lasting Hope. So so that's another option in the community.
So are there inpatient beds there on the campus where you are for people?
No, we used to have the adult crisis unit. It was a 10-bed unit, and we made the decision to close those beds down a couple of years ago.
Okay.
I'll just add real quick to that, Commissioner. Part of the model as we're developing this piece was to have a really close relationship with community inpatient facilities. And so at least on the mental health side, we have had up to now about a monthly call with all the medical directors for Lasting Hope, Emmanuel, Fremont, and other health systems, Douglas County, to make sure there's good coordination so that we can effectively, if we need to, do almost a direct admit from the psych emergency to their beds. So that's why we're sort of functioning as if the community beds are part of the same health system, which is a fairly new concept for us. So it's been pretty effective, I think.
That's great. One final question. With the pandemic impacting on everybody, have you noticed any type of uptick in people with pandemic-related psychiatric problems presenting at the ER?
I will say we've only been open during a pandemic, so it will be interesting to see if that changes down the road. I would say, if not directly, certainly indirectly. And what I mean by that are people who are presenting that have had job loss and all of the subsequent stress from that, or have had personal loss and stress from that. And Dr. Cates can speak to this more related to sort of what national data says, but ours has certainly been consistent with that. Our emergency department has been consistent in seeing people presenting with mental health crises, which, certainly is consistent with the mental health needs that people are expressing more so because of the pandemic. I don't know, Dr. Cates, if you have more you want to add to that.
I mean, we've seen an overall decrease in ED volume, I think, because people are hesitant to get exposed. So I think proportionally, we don't have data. I don't have that. I can easily find that out. But what I can tell you is nationally, data was just published last week for pediatrics. We're seeing a dramatic increase in children and youth, adolescents reporting to emergency departments in psychiatric crisis, and with opiate and other overdose. It really kind of shocking. And this is data that comes from insurance claims, and like 90% increase in the proportion of patients who are going to EDs. The percentage of them that are children with psychiatric complaints has dramatically increased. I don't know that the community generally knows not to bring children in psychiatric crisis to our ED because we don't have beds. They're really at Emmanuel. They have a child inpatient unit. So in general, people will tend to bring psych crises there. I don't know if they're seeing it locally yet, but it's a big concern in the mental health community.
It's about 30 seconds left, Commissioner Kavanaugh.
So the juvenile population that we're talking about, they would go to the Emmanuel ER rather than to your ER for these problems?
They could come to ours, but if they needed psychiatric hospitalization, then we would have to send them by ambulance and transfer them. So it just makes sense. In general, we kind of steer people, if they have a choice, better to go there. If you need to be admitted, you're already in the building.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, this has been extremely valuable. I want to ask about a service that's kind of coming on with the 911 system. Douglas County runs 911 when calls come in from people and Omaha police are sent out. They do have in one of the 5 precincts that they operate a system of sending people out to a licensed mental health person, I believe, or someone of that. And if you could expand on that and tell us what that is, that'd be helpful, and what your relationship is with it, and what we can do to support that. I know Commissioner Borgeson has come across a really excellent system from Oregon that would work as well. But I'd like to yield my time if you would talk a little bit about that system. When someone calls 911, we see some horrible stories on national news about mental health people being killed. And so if you can talk a little bit about that, I'd appreciate it, so people are comfortable making those calls.
Jen, do you want to?
I think what you're referring to, Commissioner, is the co-responders.
Yes.
There's kind of 2 different programs. There's the co-responders that are embedded within the police department, and they respond out. And that program continues to get more and more co-responders on it, and it's growing. And we interface with them well. Members from OPD are on our Community Advisory Board.
Good.
We have a subcommittee that meets every month with law enforcement, first responders, OFD, OPD, Douglas County Sheriff, really to talk through these kinds of things on how can we collaborate better. As that program is growing, they're increasing their ability to do some follow-ups with folks that tend to call 911 more frequently. And there really is, I think, an opportunity for us to be collaborating back and forth with that when they're bringing someone in, and we can help get that person through that crisis. They perhaps can then go and do a follow-up with that person later on to make sure things are going okay for them. So I think there definitely is opportunity for that. There's the crisis response teams that are separate from OPD, but they're sort of triggered by a call as well. And I think those are also places where we have opportunity to work together.
Well, one other thing I want to mention is that I believe 911 operators that are, as a Douglas County operation, are very sensitive and are doing a good job of filtering out people who are calling for help. But if there's any suggestion, and I shouldn't ask this because I'm not working with 911 anymore, I had a committee change, but if anybody, if there's any help that is needed with helping 911 further filter those out, or if you know of any other 911 system across the country that is doing something innovative, I think we are. But if you think there's ways we can improve our 911 operator system, instead of saying fire, police, and all that, or should they say mental health, or should they say something else? Whatever the system is, I think that we'd be eager to hear about it anyway.
Yeah. You know, one thing that comes to my mind, just because they had a class again last week, is related to the CIT, the critical incident training classes that a number of OPD and our local sheriff department, Douglas County, SARPI, have been through. And I think that's always a practice when there is a behavioral health kind of call. If there is a CIT trained officer that's in that precinct that's able to respond, I think that's just one extra level of having somebody that you know has had extra special training related to what they might be walking into. And I know from my previous experience at working in the community, we would always ask for that. It's not always available, but more and more folks are being trained. So I think that's an extra piece maybe.
And I believe that there's a national 3-digit hotline that'll become active in 2022, Commissioner, as well. I think it's 988 that will go to the current 1-800-273-TALK suicide lifeline as well. So I think there's some national movement towards that.
Okay, that's very helpful. For my own self, I want to thank all three of you for being so, this is really terrific, and thank you. And whoever arranged this, probably Commissioner Borgeson, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else in the chamber. Commissioner Borgeson.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to thank Dr. Liu and a company for being with us again today. And hopefully we'll do these reports as we have now. This, I think, is the third time you've been with us, the second time since you've been open. And I think it's very, very helpful to do this and have these conversations. There's a lot, and I'm going to go back and rewatch this because there's a lot of comments and questions and issues that have been brought up. And as I work with the board to, what I'd like to have are what called listening sessions, so that we could have our providers come onto a Zoom call with us and tell us what those missing pieces are, tell us what's working, what's not working, and what are the gaps. And so as I work with them to get these set up, I hear a lot of what we talked about today that could potentially be beneficial to those discussions. So again, I thank you so much for being here and being a great partner. And we certainly will continue to partner with you as we move forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And we appreciated your patience from 2015 to opening day. So look forward to the collaboration. Thank you.
Dr. Liu, thank you all. We look forward to the next time. Appreciate your time today. See you.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We'll go back up to letter A. Dr. Poor, I see you there. It's on you.
Good morning, everyone, board
Morning.
members. And this was a great presentation you had, and my thanks to Dr. Liu and his team. So just giving you a quick overview in regards to our cases. We are right now at 18.3 new cases per 100,000. The lowest has been on February 19th, which was 14.6. This is for the last few months. If we look at our cases, we are now 2 weeks in a row, we have seen some slight increases in our cases. So last week, I shared with you a 6.8% increase to the time before. And this week, we are at a 10.8% increase in our cases to the previous week. In total, 64,535 cases in Douglas County. Our positivity rate also a slight increase from 5% to 5.9% last week. Hospitalization, we are staying stable, I would say, and since March 1, every day we have been under 90 COVID patients in our local hospitals. As of last night, we have 89 individuals in our Omaha hospitals, 36 of them in the ICU, and 17 of them on ventilators. Up to now, we have unfortunately 673 deaths from the beginning of this pandemic, with a case fatality rate of 1.04%. What we had up to now in March is 2 deaths have been reported to us. So that's kind of where we are, kind of in a stable phase, I would say. We are not decreasing as we have decreased in February, but we are also not really increasing significantly. So low county transmission rate in the community. So let's talk a little bit about vaccine allotment. And you remember last week, I think I shared with you, we had 12,200 doses that were allotted for Douglas County. And later that week, we got 5,000 doses of Johnson & Johnson. So in total, we had 17,200 doses last week. Of those doses, 10% of the state allotment, which was 1,220, and all the 5,000 went to educators. So educators had 6,220 doses allocated to them. We had 2 large clinics, one at North High and one at Millard North on Saturday, only for educators, completely paperless. It was very seamless. It was a really good, both were excellent events. And I want to compliment my staff who had to work on the weekend, but I also want to compliment the schools who really set it up for us. This week, so now we had again 12,200, actually 12,190 doses. I don't know why 10 less, but we also had Nebraska Medicine got from the federal allotment 3,500 doses for educators. So that makes a total of 15,690 doses for educator this week. In addition, Hy-Vee got 3 what I call pizza boxes, that's how they look like, of 1,170 doses. That makes together 3,510 doses. That means 19,200 doses are in our community for this week. I also want to share, in addition to that, there are some pharmacies now that we are learning that they are getting direct allotments from the federal government. Doesn't come through the state, doesn't come through the county. Some of them are in Walmart and some of them are in Sam's. Now, we are getting the question, what is the eligibility for individuals going to those pharmacies? And the eligibility is the same that the county that they are in has, which means at this time it is for those 65 years and above, healthcare workers, and educators. That's really the focus group that we have at this time. In addition, I want to share with you also One World is getting a direct allotment from the federal government of 2,000 Johnson & Johnson doses. And what they are doing, because what they are seeing is they are seeing less 65 years and older coming to their clinic. So they are helping vaccinate in the community. And what they have done is they have made contact with all of the meatpacking industries, and they are going to vaccinate meat. They are going to go directly to meatpacking and vaccinate those. So that's really, really very helpful. So that's kind of where we are at this. We won't get any Johnson & Johnson doses this week. We won't get any Johnson & Johnson next week. When we look at the vaccination data, and you can go on our dashboard and see it, you can see that as of yesterday, we have given 180,121 doses of vaccine in Douglas County. When you look at from that, what has been given to Douglas County residents, we are at 144,983 doses. That means how many doses we have given to Douglas County residents. 89,560 are first doses. So potentially we can say 21% or 1 in 5 have now received a single dose in Douglas County. That's 1 of 5 of those who are eligible to receive doses. And when you look at second doses of full immunization, 55,423 have received full vaccine. That means either they have received 2 doses or they have received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which only requires 1 dose. Race and ethnicity, when you look at that, we still have to really reach out to our minority population, and a lot of efforts are going on in that regard. So 79% of the vaccines that have been provided to our white community, 6.7% to African American, and 4.9% to Hispanics, and 3.1% to Asians. I don't know if you are interested, but just to let you know, we have many, many clinics all across the community that are providing vaccines now, and we have more clinics coming on board. One of the newer ones that is coming on board is Methodist is going to staff a clinic at Miracle Hills, and that potentially could start on the 13th, which is this coming Saturday. So everything seems to be prepared. Everybody has been out there yesterday to look at the site again. We are talking about signage today and some of those last minute efforts that need to occur. Nebraska Medicine is staffing their site, of course, on 144th and Millard Avenue. Then this Saturday, we are providing for the educators only. We have at the Nebraska Medicine site, we are providing Saturday clinic for educators only. And Norris Middle School, we are providing vaccine for educators only this Saturday. So things are moving forward pretty quickly. I think what we are seeing some open appointments, and we are looking at that very careful. And we just switched this morning and said, you know, the 90-10 may not be adequate anymore. So we are switching and moving more to the critical infrastructure. That means more vaccine to educators and then more vaccine to tier 2, which is food processing, grocery stores, then going to tier 3, funeral home, transportation, U.S. Postal Service, public transport, and then congregate living, which in our case is our correction facility, shelters, and residential care. So let me share with you what I kind of foresee. I foresee that we should be done with all of this by the end of March. So April 1, I hope we can open it up to those 50 to 64-year-olds. I have to tell you, we are going to do it the same way as we did it with those 65 and above. We are doing it in 5-year increments. And the reason is that we need to kind of have an orderly process to go forward. And our 5-year increments are more than 30,000 people in each increment. So these are large groups. At the same time, also, we have had discussions and had a good discussion again with healthcare providers yesterday to see what are we going to do, what are healthcare providers going to do to identify those individuals with the highest risk. And what we in public health then would share with them is these specific sites where we have open appointments, and then we let the healthcare provider fill those appointments. So that is moving forward. We are in constant discussion and have updates with them. Some of them are proposed. They are all want to be kind of together, doing the same methodology in Douglas County, and I think that is very that's very good. So to say, but I do want to share one thing that they asked me to share with everybody: that please, patients, don't call your healthcare provider. Healthcare provider, they have electronic medical records. They know exactly what the symptoms are of their patients, what are the underlying illnesses. They are using different tools. They are looking at a calculator that the VNA has used in regards to who is at highest risk for COVID, if they have COVID, for potential mortality and bad outcomes. They are looking at the CDC high risk comorbidities that are put up there. So that's moving ahead. But like I say, we still have to go through March to the next few weeks. Variants, I just want to share with you a little bit, a lot of genomic sequencing going on in our community. In Nebraska at this time, we have identified 7 of the UK variants. 4 of them were in Douglas County residents. We have identified 16 California variants in Nebraska. 11 of them are in Douglas County. So it is really important that we are looking at those surveillance systems. Then you all have heard yesterday the good news that CDC has put out some new guidance in regards of what you can do and what you should not do when you have been fully vaccinated, meaning you have either received 2 doses and waited 14 days, or you have received Johnson & Johnson and waited 14 days. And I think that is very encouraging and should be encouraging to all of us to say, you know, vaccination really has some benefits. So that's kind of the report I wanted to share with you this morning. Are there any questions?
Yes, Dr. Poore, before we go to that, repeat the California variant number again, if you can.
The California variant is 16 statewide and 11 in Douglas County of those 16.
Okay. Commissioner Boyle. Oh, sorry, Mike Boyle. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask, Doctor, I did have to leave the room for a couple of minutes, but did you mention, one of the things that I've seen on television is a situation where people who have lifelong disabilities, who are not receiving vaccinations yet, can you tell me, are they in the queue somewhere, or are they being separated out, or can you tell me what their situation might be if you know? I know that it's the governor that decides these things, not you, I believe. So if you clarify those things, I'd appreciate it.
So those with disabilities who have a state waiver, so to say, they already have been vaccinated. And that's what we are also doing this week and last week. Also individuals who are homebound,
right,
we are having teams going out to them. But so those with disability, they are included.
Great. Doctor, I have to say, I think you're doing a terrific job under incredible pressure, so I appreciate your leadership.
Thank you.
Commissioner Maureen Boyle.
Yep. I just have a few questions too, and I agree, these reports are incredibly helpful. First, I have a citizen who was explaining to me that with Walmart and the other pharmacies that actually have access to vaccinations from the federal level, it seems like some of their qualifying, you're more qualified basically because some of them they're already rolling out that say transportation workers or grocery store workers can get the vaccine. So I think it's causing a lot of confusion, a lot of concern that some people are, quote, jumping the line. It sounds like the state of Nebraska says that those folks can get vaccinated, whereas the Douglas County isn't quite there yet. So I don't know if you can speak to that at all, or if there's anything we can do to tighten that up just so that people don't feel like they're not getting unfairly treated, I should say.
Yeah, so that is becoming a little bit an issue, and I brought it up to the state yesterday. There are pharmacies. I tell you, we have a pretty good handle on the high-Vs, and we are working with them very closely, and there are 10 of them, I think, in Douglas County who have vaccine. They follow very closely the restrictions that we have. 65 years above, healthcare workers, educators. But there are some that I didn't even know that they had vaccine, some of the Walmarts, Sam's included, and I do think they do not have clear limits around what they are supposed to vaccinate. So we will get in contact with those too. Governor has been pretty serious to say, you know, they have to follow the local restrictions. So somebody in Sarpy, somebody up in Wahoo, so they may have different restrictions in their pharmacies because the county is different at this time.
Yeah, and I think that's the part of the issue is that even a Walmart could be in a different county and have different rules than we have here in Douglas County. So I think there's a lot of people getting frustrated with that process. The second thing I have is, are you seeing with the increased variants, are you seeing increased hospitalizations with those variants?
You know, we are not seeing it at the time, but people are very interested to really test all those individuals that are hospitalized to see if we see a variant, but not at this time, Dr. Boyle.
Okay, good. And then the third thing is you mentioned April 1st possibly increasing the the number of eligible folks to ages 50 to 64 years old, and then those younger than 50 with comorbidities, you're saying their primary doctors should supply a list to the county, or how is that going to work? Are you ready to speak to that?
Yeah, so no, don't provide a list to the county. I wouldn't want to have, that's again, you're getting into health information. So it is each of the health system who is developing internally those lists so that they have the list, and starts with 64 because age is one of the determinant factor. The other factor that they are taking into consideration is, are there individuals who have more than one comorbidity? So they will develop the list, and the model is very similar of what we are doing at this time with the educators, because those lists are being developed at the hospital system level. And then we are just telling them, we have 20 spots at Nebraska Medicine Clinic. So you can put in there, we'll give you a link, put in there 20 patients that can have appointments to that clinic. So the health department, public health is not involved in that prioritization scheme. And we are just providing the openings and the appointments.
I see. And then just to be, I think I might have misspoke, but so the folks that are from 50 to 64, those are the ones that their primary doctors are going to be filling in the blanks. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's everybody under 64 years, but age is going to give you a little bit of priority in that prioritization.
Okay, good. And then will the patient have to still go to the Douglas County website to register? Do you know, or is that something the clinic?
They'll give then each of the health system, and also those who have private practices who are not affiliated with the hospital, will give them a link, and they then, those systems can make the appointments themselves.
Okay, okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Doctor. Good report. The Omaha World Herald this morning, as you undoubtedly saw, ran a headline that said 90,000 plus shots last week in Nebraska. And I think we run it right about, 29% of the population of the state. So I just wanted to kind of square that with the numbers that we're getting. If that were the case, 90,000 shots, and roughly a third of those are Douglas County, and we're reporting 19,200. Is there some other number that we're not including in the? Could you clarify that?
Absolutely. We actually, since, let me look here, since March 1st, in a week, we gave 42,282 shots. So we are far above our 29% allocation, because we do have now these pharmacies. We do have federal community health centers who get direct allocation.
Thank you for that. And thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks.
Okay, Dr. Poore, I see nothing else in here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. We'll go on to committee discussion and action. Item A is the finance report. Commissioners Morgan and Friend, do you have anything, or is it as written? Yes, thank you. We'll go on to human resources. And the item 1 is the weekly personnel report from civil service is as submitted. Item 2 are legislative issues, and item A is discussion and action on supportive legislative bills. First up is LB 464, state intent regarding behavioral health. Marcos.
Sure, Commissioners. Marcos San Martin, Douglas County Labor and Legislation. So there are 2 bills that are listed before you today. And the recommendation is to support it. Actually, these bills were brought to our attention by Sherry Glassnap and by Region 6, and they both affect mental health or behavioral health funding. In statewide and affect Region 6. So if there are questions on the bills, I believe I provided some analysis of the bills and where they're at in committee, et cetera. So I can take questions or.
Okay, any questions on LB 464, LB 465? Your recommendation is to approve those, Marcos?
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Your recommendation is to approve those per request of the Douglas County Mental Health. Is there a motion to approve?
Per share, yeah.
Is there a motion to approve LB 464 and LB 465? Motion by Commissioner Mike Boyle. Is there a second? I'll second it for the record, Mr. Clerk. Commissioner Kavanaugh, is this for this or the previous?
No, I'm sorry. That was previous.
Okay. Seeing no questions, Mr. Clerk, please roll call Zoom and vote in the chambers.
Okay, and this is to support LB 464 and 465. Commissioner Borgeson.
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Commissioners Kavanaugh and Borgeson voting yes virtually. All others voting in person with Commissioner Mike Friend abstaining.
Okay. Item B, legislative bills, physical impact discussed. Marcos, explain what you want to do with all the bills listed below.
Sure. So Commissioner, I've been requested by the chair just to kind of give some background as far as what we do with the fiscal impact of bills every single session. So I handed out a document, or Karen did, and I'm going to share my screen so you can see we'll get this set up quick. It's just a small presentation that I have, but some background on it. So every single legislative session, the county receives, and in the ballpark of maybe 50 requests from the state to do a fiscal analysis on bills. And so Sean and I, we review all those bills and that we get requests on, and we also kind of do it in conjunction with the department heads that would be affected, to get their feedback as far as how it would affect your department, et cetera. So typically we respond to those bills that would really have a negative or detrimental impact to the county. That's what we provide our response to the state. Given that they do send us a request for quite a few bills. This session, we have responded to 17 bills that we have designated as definitely having a detrimental impact or negative impact to the county. So at the request of the chair, I prepared just a really, really, really quick Excel that shows a list of bills. There's 6 on the front page there. It should be a 2-page document in legal size that I handed out. On the front page there, those are kind of the bills that we are the highest concern to us. And you've seen these on your agendas, or you've seen some of the summaries that have come from Sean and I over the past couple weeks. A little bit of background on the bill. So I'll just start from the top here. There's you'll so obviously see in the chart the bill number and then the hearing date on the bill, and then in that third column you'll see that's the title of the bill, and then right underneath it it's an informal kind of one-liner that is kind of briefs what is that bill, just as an example. The first one, LB 189, adds language to include 9% interest for all property tax refunds. The column right next to it will create a new cost mandate to the county. We're estimating from $250,000 up beyond $500,000 per year if the treasurer's office were to have to pay out 9% interest on a bill. So the board did take a position to oppose that bill. It's in committee. The next bill on the list is LB 310. That bill is, in a nutshell, will cut the inheritance tax rates in half, and so significantly reduce whatever revenue we generate from that. It's a loss of revenue in that next column of $8 million to $10 million. That's what we turned into the state, and the board decided to oppose that bill. The next 2 bills, and I think it's important to bring them to your attention. They are on general file, so they are out of committee now. It's LB 407 and LB 408. They both would have a fiscal impact to the county significantly. We are unable to really drill down to put an actual dollar number on it, but we do estimate both of them in the hundreds of thousands annually if they were passed. And so that's LB 407, deals with workers' compensation. It would require both Lancaster and us to owe workers' compensation's claim on strict mental injury claims from correctional officers. So that's one that it is on general file now. The next one below it, LB 408 from Senator Breezy, is political subdivisions. Oh, thanks. All right, there we go. So LB 407 and 408. 408, this would cap what our tax request could be in a single year at 103% of the prior year. So essentially, if property valuations, and again, this is a ballpark, over the past couple of years have gone up by 7% in value overall, as a whole for all the properties in the county, this would cap that growth at 103%. So that would have to be adjusted accordingly, resulting in a loss of revenue to the county, hundreds of thousands to millions. The next one on there is LB 613. Again, this bill, we've kind of had some discussion, about this bill already. It provides a speedy hearing rate for Turk. The consequence of this would be, Turk would have to hear hear an appeal in 6 months and then make a decision in 9 months. If they do not, it would just default to whatever the value that the appellant had brought to them. That could essentially default to the property owner, and we would lose out in some significant revenue, maybe in the short term, until Turk caught up in their caseload. So that's a bill we've marked that, yes, it could result in a significant loss of revenue to the county. The last bill that I have listed on here, at least in the highest concern, it's LB 622, and that provides a 3% limit on property value increases versus the prior year. So similar to 408, but not as far as the request itself. That's just the valuations themselves. So again, hundreds of thousands to millions, and we provided fiscal notes to the state on all of those bills. Backside, I'll switch you to the second page. Just scroll down. So on the backside, again, I've listed quite a few bills that we've turned in fiscal notes on, and they are. I think that if the board has a chance to review them, you can. They're not our highest priority. All of these are still in committee, and I won't go over them line by line unless the chair prefers that I do. But that is kind of my report. Some of them we have been able to target, exactly a dollar amount of how it would affect us. Some of them we cannot. But anyway, that's what I have to present to the board today.
Okay. Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, thanks a lot. Excuse me, this is very useful. I wanted to ask if NACO or the City of Omaha or any other governmental bodies are for or against any of these, if you know.
I can check with the city and check with NACO. I would,
or ask our lobbyists.
I would definitely, I would assume that some of them, yes, definitely they would be opposed to it. And so yeah, I can get you that comprehensive list.
Yeah, it's not necessary you give them to me, but I think
okay.
It'd be some of the means that I've used in the past when I was on the NACO board in Lincoln was that I would, when I testified on behalf of Douglas County, I didn't mention Douglas County. If there was a county that was having a reduction in their property taxes out in the Panhandle, I'd talk about how damaging it was to Morrill County,
Sure.
And it kind of caught people off guard, but it kind of put things in focus. So I think you have any alliances we can get with small counties on these issues, and it's kind of disarming when we work with them instead of just going down and crying for ourselves. And Sean is aware of that.
Right, yep,
Let's
definitely.
see, there's a
We
couple
definitely
that
work in hand with NACO.
Yeah, there's a couple here that I don't know that, I know that we can't do anything about it at this late date, but all these efforts are to reduce property taxes. And, you hear about, the last time I heard about the state's finances, they were understated, and they had a surplus of $683 million they didn't expect. I think what we ought to do is try to get, when some of these things like, where they want to cut property taxes and 3% and all that stuff, that we ought to, on our radar, we ought to be talking to Sean about, when they do that, we should try to get an amendment to replace the property tax reduction with state income tax revenue, so that the state will give us that money. And if they take away $65 million in property taxes, if they give us $65 million in, income tax, it's just, they really need to focus on that. And, I asked Joe last year to talk about what the criminal justice system was costing the taxpayers in Douglas County, and it included Omaha, and it exceeded $300 million. And I mean, it's just unbelievable. And we have all those costs, just like this morning I was talking about the health care for our detention center for the men and women, and it's $6 million a year. And it's just, we are not really, it's not your fault. We're not representing ourselves well. They don't understand what we do. We're an arm of the state, but we don't have any real state funds. So anyway, it's a very good report. Thanks a lot. Nice job.
Sure. Okay.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Yeah, if you could send this to us electronically, it's not contained in the backup document package that I have anyhow. That would be good. Could you do that, please?
Sure, yes. Yes, I will.
The legislature's in the 39th day of a 60-day session, and basically, I think what they're doing are priority bills. I don't see any indication on here that any of these bills are prioritized. Can you tell us if they are?
Yes, I can tell you, Commissioner, which bills are prioritized. I don't believe that the prioritization deadline has passed yet, so you'll have to give me a minute to find that list. The last time I believe I checked, the last time I was up here, there's only like 9 bills that were prioritized, and none of them were on this list. Let me do that analysis. Maybe that's easier for me to do off camera and give you whether or not any of these have been prioritized.
Sure. And, if you're going to send this to us electronically, maybe you could note that because it'll certainly play into whether or not the bill's even going to, be considered on the floor, even if it makes it out of committee. And bills that aren't out of committee by now without a priority are really going to have a difficult time even getting on the agenda. So that'll be an important consideration going forward. We'd like to know that.
You done, Commissioner Gavin?
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Friend.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Marcos, great information here, and I promised that I wouldn't weigh in anymore on these things. I just let all the chips fall where they may, but I'm gonna slightly opine. This is a great list, and you and Sean and all the team members have encompassed some of the problems that have really been festering over about the last 17 years. I mean, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, I think the property tax system in our state is inequitable. I think property tax in general is probably the worst way to tax somebody. That's not your deal, Marcos. But what could be your deal and Sean's and the team's, I don't see, what I would opine on also is I think our sales tax system in this state, while not necessarily totally inequitable, is broken as well. Is there anything that you guys noticed? Is there anybody taking a crack at our sales tax system here? Because at one point in a previous life, we used to pound sales tax reform. And I guess your opinion, have you seen anything come down the pike that relates to sales tax and the reform that really is required in this state? Just curious.
I haven't. I will have to check with Sean. I will say, there is one bill that is listed on this on our response list that, deals with sales tax, and that's that EPIC, putting in play a 10.5% sales tax and doing away of all, all other forms of taxes.
I didn't mean to laugh.
I don't believe that's going to go anywhere, but
Yeah.
yeah. So that's definitely on there. But no, I can follow up with Sean if there's any other sales tax reform.
Okay.
And,
yeah, we'll have fun.
yeah,
We'll talk
that would
offline
be-
at some point and opine with each other on these. Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Boyle, did you want to say something else? Okay. Okay, Marcos, I see no other questions. There's no action on that. There's just information.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, sorry, I didn't. We
No,
don't
I
have the
don't-
screens up, Marianne. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I don't have my thing to raise my hand on here, but so I wanted to explain a little bit further on this chart, because as the legislature started their 90-day session and it continues, you can see that we have bills thrown at us, and Marcos does a fantastic job of creating those fiscal notes, but we never have seen kind of like the whole picture of what's before us. And to me, they may not be out of committee yet. They may be on general file. But for me to present this was so that we could get that 30,000 foot level to show here are some major bills that will impact what we do. What the next step is, I'm going to ask Marcos to create a cover sheet that we can send to our senators so that they see what this means to counties. And so again, we do have to do a better job of telling our story of how these impact counties, especially again through the legislative process. So this was a start. If anybody has any suggestions on, how the spreadsheet looks, I think Marcos did a fantastic job. It's very concise. It can be a one-pager, two-sided. But again, it was for the first priority was for me to be able to provide to everybody a 30,000 foot level of all of the bills that Marcos brings to us that affect counties, and again, the fiscal notes that he's done such a fantastic job on. And then next, as the legislature continues, and some of these may or may not get out of committee or may not advance, I think it's still very important for us to tell our story about the impact that these will have on county government. So I'll work with Marcos on that, and then show you all. And then again, if anybody has any suggestions or comments, please let me know. But this was really good, and you can see it's very impactful so even if a couple of them move forward, they again could have a very negative impact on how we operate as counties. So thanks, Marcos, great job.
Sure.
Commissioner Boyle.
I just want to say quickly that I received some really well-written material from our finance guru, Joe Lorenz, when he was speaking of the loss of what the loss of inheritance tax would mean. And he pointed out all the programs, including veterans and people in our secure facilities and everything. He really did an excellent job. I think that's the way, Commissioner Borgerson, the way to get a point across is to link the cuts to and the transfers and all this sort of thing to what would happen, because I don't think people understand that we're an arm of state government and we can only do what they dictate. And so all of the work that we do, including the state doesn't pay us a dime for housing all their prisoners. And the last time I was keeping count of it, when Governor Heinemann was in office, it approached a loss of $20 million to us when they stopped the funding, and I just quit counting because they were never going to pay. So I think if we show the services that we provide and that what would happen if these property taxes are cut, and they're not replaced. I think that's, Joe's approach was terrific.
Marcos, come on.
Sure. So Commissioner, to follow up to Commissioner Kavanaugh's comments, I just looked really quick on the updates from the website, from the legislative website. It looks like only 11 senators have turned in their priorities for this year, or for this session. So there's only 11 listed to date, and you know, the final date for priority submissions is March 11th. So they'll have to designate their priority this week, but there's only 11 of them. And to bring to your attention, LB 408 on the first page of my list from Senator Breezy, that is his priority bill. So LB 408, which is the political subdivisions to be capped at the 3% tax request, 103% of the prior year, and to exceed that to require voter approval. So that, yes, there is one that is now on general file that has been prioritized. Looks like it's listed here at 408.
Okay. Seeing nothing else in the chamber, we need no action on that. So I know of any other, no other legislation we need to discuss. Excuse me, Commissioner Maureen Boyle.
Yeah, I think this, as far as other legislation goes, yesterday in our pre-board meeting, I brought out how last week we had some citizens that were concerned about the NRD taking over or trying to push forth the construction of a dam site 10. So I happened to notice in the legislative resolutions that the state, Mr. Senator Erdman has, talks about how it's a resolution so that the NRD has to study their projects to ensure that they are really doing what they're elected to do, which is to mitigate flooding and provide funding for that. So bottom line is, I'm just bringing it up because we might be revisiting this in the future, and that I support this legislative resolution, and also had requested possibly for them to consider a financial impact to, say, regular citizens, property taxes, et cetera.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Boyle. Seeing nothing else? We got something else?
Sure, I can show LR23 if you wanted to see it. It's whatever Commissioner Boyle.
Very quickly.
Sure.
The LR is LR23, and again, it's a study that deals with the NRD, so.
Okay. You provide that to the, okay. We got a question, crowd. Yeah, Luis? Yes. Oh,
okay.
Your question on LR23, Luis?
Yeah, no. I have a question on what you've reviewed, okay. LB 408.
Go ahead.
I was looking at the spreadsheet and I saw that LB 408 to adopt the Property Tax Request Act says that the political subdivisions will be capped at a 3% tax request, limit of 103% on prior year, and that exceeding 3% plus to require voter approval. My question on that is, if I can get an answer, is there currently a cap in place for the political subdivisions?
No, only the cap that you can go as high as you have available on your levy. And we're only, I think, close to halfway on the amount of levying authority that we have as a county. So there is no cap right now.
Okay, thank you.
Just for the record, though, and I'm looking over here to make sure my statement's good, a 3% cap would put us, I don't know about other counties, in a significant deficit every year. We need somewhere 4 to 5% just to cover the cost of salary increases, utility cost, and other just appreciation of cost of living. So 3% will put us pretty much in a cutting mode continuously, and with a very slim chance of getting any above approved by the taxpayers. I saw somebody else, Larry, come on.
Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha 68132. You know, if we have problems getting revenue, maybe the body should think about the programs that they're spending money on and cutting back on some of the programs instead of continually raising requests for revenue, which basically comes back to my pocketbook. There are certain things that Americans have been able to do without. And as I recall in the past, there was a revolution over taxation without representation and things. And they used to be associations, private associations to help people out. Maybe we can get back to some of that, not rely on government. They also used to tar and feather representatives that weren't doing what the people wanted. They also threw overboard the foreign tax or T and stopped buying foreign things and stopped using foreign companies. So today, these legislative exchange councils like the ALEC or ALCE and the NACO, the National Association of Counties, the National League of Municipalities, all the big boys get together and they take up your time so that you can help propose whatever it is their agenda is. But the citizens that you represent don't get enough time with you because you're so busy with all these other things. And yes, you do run down to Lincoln and propose bills, so don't make it sound like they impose everything on you guys. We know that you do that. If not directly, you run for office. Would you leave here? You run for the state. And you go down there and then you impose stuff on us here. We have a couple senators down there right now that used to be here. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Larry, this is one time I get to respond. And I do want to say that you have, and all citizens of Douglas County have complete representation. You're able to come down and talk to us. You're able to contact us any way we want. My cell phone rings. And we are required by the state to provide services. We are required to do, to issue license plates and all the rest. The question comes up, do we really need 5 branches? Should we close the 5 branches and make you drive out to 176th Street where apparently they've got the DMV now for the state, either that or go to Sarpy County or up to 56th and Ames. You know, the thing is that the services we provide go to veterans, they go to people with Alzheimer's. We don't have to operate the Douglas County Health Center, but we accept, and many times, we accept people who have no other place to go for whatever reason, either their income or because other places have kicked them out. Not too often, but that happens because of their behavior when they have Alzheimer's and mental disabilities. So we'll talk, because we're going to get a cup of coffee after this meeting that we talked about, and I appreciate it. We're going to sit down and talk about, and I'll try to fill you in on some of these things. But, tarred and feathered, I was kind of tarred and feathered a few years ago, and I recovered from it pretty well. So, but anyway, I learned some lessons, and in any event, I think that I try to listen, I always have, and I think it's important that you know that you have our ears. We listen to you, but there's some misunderstanding that we're not. You're not enemies. We might be opponents on some things, but we're not your enemy. We're not. We work for you.
Thank you. Seeing nothing else, we'll move on. We do have need for an executive session on 3 matters: personnel, litigation, and legal advice. I'm looking at, no, I got you. I'll give you right. Teresa, I'm looking at you. Is that okay? So what I'd like to do is have a motion, a second, and to go into executive session. Motion by Commissioner Morgan. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Friend. And Commissioner Boyle, you want a moment of privilege?
I do. I just want to say thank you. I just want to say that I'm going to try to continue to attend these meetings. I'm going to be undergoing treatment for lung cancer fairly soon at the Buffett Cancer Center. And I may not be able to, because of my immune situation, because it will be compromised significantly, as most cancer patients are. So if I can't appear in person, I will be using Zoom. I am sending a letter to the governor today asking for him to allow me to continue to use Zoom beyond the deadline in April. So we'll see how that goes. But I want to take a moment to thank all the support I've received from fellow members of the county board and the staff. It's really been really terrific. You folks have really been a real boost. I'm very positive. I can't explain. I'm trying not to be insane about this, but I'm positive, and I have terrific support from my family. First of all, my daughter, who's very talented, Dr. Maureen Boyle, who has great advice for me, and her youngest sister, who is a nurse practitioner in San Francisco, is also extremely helpful. They're both just really on top of things incredibly. And then my son Mike, who sells medical equipment, is involved, and he's helped. And Pat and Jim, they are giving me rides all sorts of places. When I had a scan the other day, Pat came down and spent the night. He has 5 kids. He came down and spent the night. And so I've got terrific support. And then the grandkids are amazing. My granddaughter Alex, who until just a few weeks ago worked at the Buffett Cancer Center, she's transferred to pharmacy now. But all of them, even my grandson, Sam, who's, I don't know, he must be about 28 or so, came down and vacuumed my condo. And I was just amazed. I mean, he emptied the trash, did the whole deal, did the dishes. And so I have to tell his mother, because I don't think he's ever done that at home. But in any event, I just want to tell you that I really appreciate the treatment. This all started when I went in to get a routine x-ray on my back and blood tests and so forth, because I was having back surgery. And I got a call from Dr. Sartorius, my gatekeeper, and he said, "Mike, you've got a growth on your lung," and I couldn't believe it. So the only thing I said to my son Mike about this is that he needs to quit smoking. But the other thing I said was, I quit smoking 37 years ago. And he said, "You know what dawned on me?" And he said, "No, what? I could have been smoking all these years." So anyway, that's my sick sense of humor. So in any event, hang in there with me. We're going to be optimistic. I am. And I'm in really great hands at the Buffett Cancer Center. So thank you to everyone who's helping me in this endeavor. Thanks a million. I just want to let you all know I appreciate it.
Commissioner Morgan.
Mike, we're all praying for you. And I told you that a few weeks ago when we talked. So I know that there's many, many people in this community saying prayers for you, and we'll continue those each and mostly every day. So hang in there.
Thank you, DJ. I have to say, too, that I was talking to, I called Mike Kelly, who was a former commissioner and a good friend of mine, and he's an attorney, and his son Sean is our lobbyist, and Mike was involved in it. I called Mike, and he said, we're laughing and joking and everything, and my phone looked like the Irish Mafia, all the people I was talking to. And anyway, so Mike Kelly says to me, I think he's in Arizona, he said, I'm thinking about prayers and stuff, and I expected him to say somewhat the same as most people say. So he said, I'm going to give Kathy Kelly a call and have her pray for you. So anyway, thanks again. Thanks, PJ. I appreciate your friendship.
Commissioner Maureen Boyle.
Yeah, just to kind of go along the same lines, yes, I'm a physician, so I'm helping interpret everything, which it's kind of a strange but honorable position to be in. I'm learning a lot about my dad, and just seeing him navigate the hallways. He's joking with people. He's going to get his MRI scans and everything. So nothing has changed with him. I will tell you that. He is the same Mike Boyle you will always see, whether you like that or not. The guy's got 9 lives, so he's going to come through this. Attitude is about 99.9% of it. We are people who like to laugh instead of cry. So bottom line is we are realistic optimists. And so I just think he's gonna fight hard, but we're gonna laugh along the way. We're gonna have our moments, but at the same time, I feel very, very confident that we're in great hands at UNMC, and it's gonna be a challenge, but we've got fantastic support. So yeah, just as a family, we just want to say thank you to everybody who has reached out to every one of us about this.
Thanks, Maureen. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Boyle.
All righty. With that, there is a motion and a second to go into executive session for personnel, litigation, and legal. Yes, 9:03. And note, it is 11:30. 11:45 now. We will convene there in 11:55 to give time to close down and set up there. 11:55, we'll convene in room 903. Please vote and roll call on Zoom.
Commissioner Borgeson?
Yes.
Commissioner Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Commissioners Borgeson and Kavanaugh voting virtually, all their commissioners in person.